There is a force more powerful than steel, more resilient than concrete fortifications, and more decisive than any marching army. It is a silent, often invisible force that flourishes in the darkest places of human experience, in the forgotten corners where hope seems to have abandoned its post. We speak of compassion, of that innate impulse to reach out not to hurt, but to heal. It is the pulse of humanity that insists on beating even beneath the deafening noise of war, a gentle melody that refuses to be silenced by the cacophony of destruction. Imagine for a moment the most unlikely scenario, a battlefield where the lines between friend and foe dissolve, not by force of arms, but by the power of a single act of care. What happens when the oath to protect life collides directly with the order to take it? This is not a theoretical question, but the key to unlocking one of the most extraordinary and least told stories of World War II, an event that challenges our understanding of power, authority, and the true nature of courage in times of extreme conflict. Today, we travel to the wounded heart of Europe in 1944, to a moment when a single woman, armed only with her medical knowledge and unwavering determination, rewrote the rules of combat. She was neither a spy nor a military strategist, but a nurse whose commitment to life became an unexpected weapon. Prepare to learn the story of how 50 German soldiers, men trained to fight to the end, surrendered to an American nurse, and, even more amazing, begged her to remain by their side. How can a promise guide someone through hell on earth? For Lieutenant Reba Whittle of the United States Army Nurse Corps, the promise was a sacred oath. It wasn't a promise of victory or glory, but a promise of service, of being present in moments of human vulnerability. When she enlisted, she left behind the predictability and security of a world at peace, trading the silent corridors of a hospital for a sky torn by anti-aircraft fire, driven by a purpose that transcended fear. Her journey began not on a battlefield, but in a heart that believed in the power of caring. Every bandage she learned to apply, every word of comfort she learned to offer was part of a validation of her choice. She was unknowingly preparing for a test no training manual could have predicted. Her mission was to evacuate the wounded, to be an angel of mercy thousands of feet above the ground, a beacon of hope on a medical aircraft crossing the dangerous skies of occupied Europe. The C-47 aircraft she flew was like a flying cathedral of compassion, a temporary sanctuary for broken souls. There, amid the constant hum of the engines and the fragility of the fuselage, Reba practiced her calling. She saw no uniforms, only wounds. She heard no enemy accents, only the pained moans of young men who, just hours before, had been considered adversaries. To her, they were simply patients, men in desperate need of a healing touch. This context is crucial to understanding what happened next. Reba's authority came not from a rank or a weapon, but from the universality of her mission. In a world divided by hatred, she represented a unifying principle, the idea that all life has value and deserves to be preserved. She was the embodiment of an undeclared truce, a walking reminder that beneath the insignia and ideologies, everyone bleeds the same color. The journey of pain she validated with each flight was a microcosm of the war itself. Each soldier she treated carried the physical and emotional scars of conflict. In caring for them, she wasn't just treating bullet or shrapnel wounds. She was trying to mend the very fabric of humanity, one patient at a time. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work, but it strengthened her resolve with each passing day. Think of the plane as a metaphor for your soul, a vessel of care sailing through an ocean of chaos. Inside, order was restored, pain was soothed, and hope was nurtured. But the outside, the world beyond, remained unforgiving. War respects no sanctuaries, and the sky, which was your place of work and purpose, would soon become the stage for your greatest trial, the place where your promise would be tested to its absolute limit. The sound of metal breaking, the smell of smoke filling the cabin, the sudden and violent loss of altitude. The validation of her courage was about to be forged in the fires of the crash. In September 1944, near Aachen, Germany, her plane was hit. The flying cathedral was falling, and with it, Reba Whittle's orderly world disintegrated in a whirlwind of panic and chaos, hurtling toward an unknown fate. The transition from caregiver to captive was brutal and instantaneous. Surviving the fall, wounded, she found herself in enemy territory, surrounded not by patients who needed her help, but by soldiers who viewed her as a prisoner. The promise of care seemed a distant memory, a cruel irony in the face of this new reality. How could she heal when she herself was broken and imprisoned by those her country fiercely fought? She was taken to a prison camp, a place where identity is stripped away and hope is a scarce resource. For many, this would be the end of the line, a point of surrender, not military but spiritual. But the promise Reba carried within her wasn't tied to a place or a condition. It was part of who she was, and not even the barbed wire fences could completely imprison her. There, in that desolate environment, she encountered a new kind of battlefield. There were no explosions or gunfire, but the slow, silent agony of wounded men, both Allied and German, huddled together in precarious conditions. The war had created a shared hell, and it was in this hell that Reba Whittle's true nature would reveal itself, not as a prisoner, but as the nurse she had always been. Reba's fighting past wasn't in training camps with rifles, but in hospitals, fighting death with gauze and sulfa. Her training was to hear the inaudible, the cry for help in a feverish gaze, the story of a life contained in a single tear. These were the skills she brought into captivity, tools far more potent than any weapon her captors possessed, for they were tools of construction in a world focused on destruction. The air in the makeshift camp hospital was heavy with the smell of disease and despair. Imagine the biting cold, the dim light of a single flickering bulb, the constant sound of coughing and moaning. It was a place where the hierarchy of war crumbled before the sovereignty of pain. A German guard with a wounded leg was not an enemy. He was a man in agony. A captured American pilot was not a hero. He was a young man with a high fever. In this scenario, Reba began to work. With minimal resources, tearing her own uniform to make bandages, she moved among the makeshift beds, a figure of calm and competence amidst the chaos. She made no distinctions. A nurse's oath is universal, and her compassion knew no uniform. Every life was precious. Every call for help was met with the same dedication. Her presence was an anomaly. A woman, an American, a nurse caring for her own captors. The German soldiers watched her first with suspicion, then with curiosity, and finally with a deep and growing respect. They saw the strength in her kindness, the authority in her expertise. She was unknowingly disarming them with each act of care, replacing fear and hostility with gratitude. Reba's support figures weren't physically present. They were the memories of her instructors, the voices of her fellow nurses, the image of her family waiting at home. Every time she cleaned a wound, it was as if she were honoring the training she'd received. Every time she offered a word of comfort, it was as if she were channeling her mother's love. These invisible connections sustained her, were her anchor in the storm. Days turned into weeks. Reba became the center of that small universe of suffering. The 50 men, a mix of nationalities and loyalties, became her patients, her responsibility. She organized their care, enforced hygiene rules with the authority of a matriarch, and fought for more supplies with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cubs. She was no longer a prisoner. She was the commander of this outpost of humanity. Food was scarce, medicine almost non-existent, but she multiplied what little she had with ingenuity and an iron will. She taught other prisoners how to help, creating a team of caregivers from broken soldiers. The makeshift hospital became a place of order and purpose, a small pocket of civilization amid the barbarity of war. The German guards, who were supposed to be her oppressors, began to seek her advice. They brought their own wounds, their own illnesses, not with the arrogance of captors, but with the humility of patience. They saw that her dedication was not a strategy, it was genuine. She was simply doing her duty, a duty that transcended the battle lines drawn on the general's maps. And then, the turning point. The order came that Reba would be transferred to another camp, one for officers. The news spread through the barracks like a cold wind. For the men she cared for, both German and Allied, the thought of her leaving was inconceivable. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the force holding this fragile ecosystem of survival together. That's when the unthinkable happened. The German soldiers, her captors, protested. They refused to let her go. They went to their superiors and argued, begged for her to stay. They needed her. This unarmed woman, their prisoner, had become so essential to their well-being, both physical and moral, that they were willing to defy orders to keep her close. In this act of supplication, the capture was reversed. Reba Whittle, the prisoner, had captured the hearts and loyalty of 50 enemy soldiers. Not with a gun, not with a threat, but with the overwhelming force of compassion and duty. They no longer saw her as an enemy, but as their protector, their only real hope in that godforsaken place. Her story forces us to pause and connect with something deeper. It's an intimate conversation about the nature of power. We've been conditioned to see power in terms of strength, dominance, and control. But what if true power, the power that truly changes the world, is found in vulnerability, in empathy, in serving others, even those considered our enemies? I want you to think of a moment in your life when you witnessed an act of compassion so unexpected that it completely changed your perception of a person or a situation. A moment when kindness appeared where you only expected hostility. This memory is a treasure, proof that Reba Whittle's spark lives in all of us, waiting for the opportunity to shine in the darkness. We created this space not just to tell stories, but to build a community around the empathy they generate. When you share your experience in the comments, you're not just typing words on a screen. You're weaving a chain of empathy, connecting your story with those of thousands of others, creating a mosaic of hope that reminds us of our shared humanity. So I invite you to join this movement. Scroll down to the comments and share your moment. And to unify our voice, to show the world that we believe in the power that transcends war and conflict. Begin your comment with the key phrase, Humanity Won. Let these words echo as a tribute to Reba and all who, like her, chose to heal rather than harm. In doing so, we transform a comment section into a living memorial. A place where quiet bravery is celebrated, where compassion is recognized as the highest form of strength. Her story becomes part of a larger legacy, inspiring others to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Together, we honor the indomitable spirit this nurse taught us. Reba's transformation from prisoner to central authority figure was built on 3 pillars of human power. The first, and perhaps the most obvious, was courage. But not the courage of a soldier advancing under enemy fire. It was a quieter, deeper courage. The courage to rise every morning in a hostile environment and choose service over despair, routine over chaos. Her courage was evident in every decision she made to treat a German soldier with the same care she gave an American. It took immense inner strength to overcome fear, resentment, and self-preservation and focus solely on the oath she swore. It was the courage to be a calm spot in the eye of the storm, to maintain her professionalism and humanity intact while everything around her crumbled. Consider the practical application of this courage. It was looking into the eyes of a young guard, seeing not an enemy, but a frightened boy with a serious infection, and telling him with calm authority that he needed to follow your instructions to survive. It was the courage to improvise, to make life or death decisions with almost no resources, taking on a responsibility that would crush most people. This form of courage became contagious. The other prisoners, seeing her resilience, found the strength to endure their own suffering. The guards, witnessing her impartial dedication, were forced to confront their own humanity. Her courage didn't destroy the enemy. It dissolved it, demonstrating that the identity of caretaker was stronger than the identity of prisoner. The second pillar was empathy, the most powerful tool in her arsenal. Empathy was her ability to see beyond uniforms, nationalities, and ideologies. It was the ability to connect with the universal suffering that war inflicted on everyone, regardless of their side. For Reba, a wound was a wound, and pain knew no flag. Empathy in action was how she communicated. Even with the language barrier, she used touch, tone of voice, and eye contact to convey safety and care. She listened to the men's stories, learned about their families, and saw the human beings behind the soldiers' masks. This connection bridged the chasm of hatred that war had created between them. This ability to put herself in another's shoes was what ultimately protected her. The German soldiers no longer saw an American prisoner of war. They saw our nurse. She became part of them, indispensable to their survival. Her empathy transformed them from captors into protectors, a feat no military strategy could achieve. By demonstrating empathy in an environment designed to dehumanize, Reba performed a radical act. She insisted on the shared humanity of everyone in the camp. She proved that even in the darkest circumstances, human connection can flourish and become a force for protection and survival, more effective than any wall or weapon. The third and final pillar was duty. Reba's sense of duty was her moral compass, the North Star that guided her through the darkness of captivity. Her duty as a nurse wasn't optional. It didn't depend on circumstances. It was engraved in her soul. It was a professional and personal obligation to alleviate suffering wherever she found it. This sense of duty gave her unquestionable moral authority. When she gave an order regarding a patient's treatment, it wasn't the prisoner speaking, it was the medical professional. Her competence and unwavering commitment to her role created an aura of natural leadership. The soldiers, trained to respect hierarchy and expertise, instinctively obeyed her. Duty manifested itself in her tireless work ethic. She never stopped, never rested, as long as someone needed her. This absolute dedication inspired profound respect. The soldiers saw that she was not acting out of fear or to curry favor, but because she deeply believed in her mission. She was the embodiment of integrity. In the end, it was these three powers, courage, empathy, and duty, that allowed an unarmed woman to capture 50 soldiers. She didn't conquer their territory, she won their respect. She didn't shackle them, but bound them to her with bonds of gratitude and loyalty. She demonstrated that the most effective tools of transformation are not forged in metal, but in the human heart. The new reality that emerged in that prison camp was a sensory testament to Reba's impact. Imagine the sound. Where once there had been silent distrust and shouted orders, there was now a softer communication, a respectful exchange of words between captors and captives. The dominant sound was no longer that of marching boots, but that of the routine of care she had established. Smell it. The oppressive odor of disease and neglect began to give way to a smell of cleanliness, of improvised antiseptics, and of hot soup, however thin. It had brought a sense of order and sanitation that was, in itself, an act of rebellion against the degradation of war. The air, though still heavy, carried a shred of hope. Consider the scene. German soldiers helping carry a wounded Allied prisoner following Reba's calm instructions. A guard sharing a piece of his bread with a patient. These were visions of an impossible reality, a world turned upside down where enmity had been suspended in favor of a common goal, survival, orchestrated by their nurse. The impact of her actions extended beyond physical well-being. She restored dignity. By treating each man as a valuable individual, she reminded them of their own humanity, which war sought to erase. She gave them a purpose to care for each other, and a leader to follow not an officer, but a healer. The sense of historic change was palpable in that small shed. For a brief period, the laws of war were repealed and replaced by the laws of compassion. Reba Whittle had created a small republic of humanity, a nation of 50 souls united not by a flag, but by their mutual dependence and respect for it. Eventually, Reba was exchanged for German prisoners and returned home, becoming the only American female POW in the European theater to be repatriated. But the new reality she created did not disappear with her departure. She remained in the memories of those men, a whispered story of the American nurse who was mightier than a battalion. Her legacy lies not in battle records, but in living proof that the mission to heal is a transcendent force. She demonstrated that authority does not need a weapon to be exercised, and that true victory is not about defeating an enemy, but about affirming humanity in the face of savagery. Life after the transformation for those 50 men was undoubtedly marked by that experience. For them, The war was not only a story of battles and losses, but also the story of an encounter with an unexpected form of power, an unforgettable lesson in the resilience of the human spirit. The vision of that new reality created by a single woman serves as an eternal reminder, a reminder that even when the world seems irreparably broken, divided by hatred and conflict, one individual's decision to act with courage, empathy, and duty can create a new possibility, an oasis of hope in the desert of destruction. Reba Whittle's story leaves us breathless, not because of the violence of war, but because of the quiet strength of humanity that refuses to be extinguished. It's a distant echo that calls us to be better, to recognize the power that resides within each of us, to choose compassion over conflict, healing over pain. Stories like this are more than just tales of the past. They are refuges for the soul, safe spaces where we can reconnect with the best aspects of our nature. In an often noisy and divided world, these tales of quiet bravery and radical empathy offer us a place to rest, reflect, and find inspiration for our own lives and challenges. That's why this channel exists. We are guardians of these flames, dedicated to finding and sharing the stories that prove that history isn't just about kings and generals, but about ordinary people who accomplished extraordinary feats of humanity. Each video is an invitation for you to enter this refuge with us. If you felt the power of Reba's story, if you believe the world needs more narratives like this, I invite you to join our community. Subscribing isn't just clicking a button. It's an act of belonging. It's declaring that you choose to remember, that you choose to honor courage, empathy, and duty. It's becoming part of a movement that keeps alive the memory of our shared humanity.